Perez will play more DH coming up probably next year, I assume. But he's not going to hit 48 home runs again. You can't. I mean, how many catchers? The first time a catcher ever did that. So what you're paying for next year, if you're paying in the third round, is you're paying for last year's stats. That's what contracts are. Teams are paying players for last year's stats. You're not paying for what's happening this year. If they are, then the Mets should have paid Francisco Lindor a couple of bucks. It's a matter of paying what you think the person is valued right now. And when you draft a catcher like Perez or like J. Realmuto. Not that they are the two best catchers out there, but I would not spend the draft capital at that point. I'd rather spend it somewhere else.
Ian?
I'm not nearly in Ruvain's intensity about it at all. And certainly if it falls to the fourth round, there's a league I played in. It's a one-catcher league, and I think that's also somewhat dependent, right? If it's a two-catcher league, if it's a one-catcher league. But this was a one-catcher league, 20-team dynasty, Devil's Rejects, and we had Salvador Perez on the team, and we won home runs by 30 home runs over the course of the season. And it was all because of Salvador Perez. He played 161 games. He hit in 161 games this season. I think there's value there. I don't know that I'm going to spend it in the third. But if he's hanging around in the late fourth, early fifth, I'm going to do it. And if it's, let's say in an auction, 15-team auction, Ariel, if I put down $24 for Salvador Perez, are you going to 25?
I mean, I bought Salvador Perez in both Labor and Tout Wars this year, and I did not regret it.
No.
I mean, here's my deal with getting a high-priced catcher.
And remember, I had to push you in Labor to get Salvador Perez. You initially didn't want him, and I said, no, go get him. So you were actually on the fence about paying that much that we paid for him.
Well, how much did you pay? What did you pay?
I think we paid 19. But again, I think for that specific case, I said let's spend 10 and get like Grandal. But the market premium was low. So here's the difference between all the stuff we were talking about before with steals versus catcher. Steals is a market premium issue, meaning there's a high demand for stolen bases. That's why people pay more. But there's a scarcity issue with catchers, right? There's just only a few catchers who are above replacement. The rest stink. So the premium that you're paying, especially in a two-catcher league, is very high, but it's not a premium. It's what they're actually worth because of scarcity. So the answer that I have, it's a little bit of a cop-out answer. You can think of it, but it really depends on what everybody else is doing. If the market premium is low all around, if people just don't like paying for catchers, you should be paying a lot more for Salvador Perez. Or I'm saying you should buy him at the lower excess market premium. Right. If everybody is pushing up, you don't want to spend a fortune on Salvador Perez. Meaning, it's easier to see this in a draft. I'm going to give you the exaggerated case. If the third catcher is going in the sixth round, Salvador Perez in the third is a tremendous bargain. But if the third catcher goes in the 12th round, Salvador Perez in the third is really weak. Right? It really depends on what everybody else does. One other thing about catchers, wait, let
me interrupt you. I'm sorry. If it's in the fourth round, just clean, late fourth, and Salvador Perez is sitting there in a two-catcher, 15-team NFBC-style league, try to forget the market premium right now, where everyone else is going. Do you think he brings value enough to be worth that pick because of what he gives to that position? Because nobody else is getting near that many at-bats compared to what Perez is doing.
Yeah, and that comes to my other point here. The answer is, in a pure value answer, it's yes by a mile. The one problem, and this is for everybody to decide, is that there's a risk issue. Because let's say your first baseman gets hurt, then you can pick up a guy off the waiver wire. He's going to be lousy, but he brings some stats. Sure. If Salvador Perez gets hurt, your replacement for him utterly stinks. He's going to bat 200, 190. I mean, you're getting garbage. So there's the risk of injury for him affects your team a lot more than the risk of injury for somebody else. So you got to be cautious about paying too much of a premium because of the injury risk. It's the same deal with Mondesi for steals, but it's true for catcher.
But he's at the end of the fourth round. It's the 60th pick. You're on the clock.
I'm picking him next year because I think that he's going to start DHing more games. And
he can't. He can't DH anymore. He DH'd every single game that he wasn't catching. He was DHing. I mean, He played
right,
every day.
right. Yes. So I'm saying because I think he's catcher slash the DH where the injury risk is less, he's worth more. And if the DH comes to the National League, actually the same
Then
can be
you could
true
do-
for
right.
JT Realmuto.
But that's
Then
why
he's-
I don't put Real Muto in that same category for that exact reason. Because Real Muto, if he's not starting behind the plate, maybe he'll get a game or two at first base. But Sal Perez is batting third for the Kansas City Royals.
No, but if
batting
the
fourth.
DH comes to
But
the
if it
National
comes there,
League, then it's true.
But then who would you pick? Who would you take? Let's say the DH is there. Who do you have hired next year, Sal Perez or JT Realmuto?
I haven't done my numbers. It's probably going to be Sal Perez.
It's going to be Perez. It's because Realmuto is not going to steal as much as he starts getting older. Also, catchers in general don't steal, and Realmuto, some of his value is in his stolen bases because he gives you like 10, 15. Used to give you 10, 15 stolen bases.
Yeah.
Those are good days.
Next lesson learned: closers. I kind of think that the lesson learned here is pay up for a closer. I mean, again, running the numbers, if you picked a closer in the 4th round, 5th round, 6th round, they pretty much held value on the average. And then if you look all the way down, the return is negative. I've got no value from round 17 all the way through 27 on average for a relief pitcher. So it's pay up for a closer, and otherwise you're play the waiver wire, which if you bought one of those Toronto Blue Jays in April and then brought another Toronto Blue Jay in April, you busted 40% of your fab for nothing.
All right, so I'm going to share my theory about closers that I've had for a number of years and that I've used for a number of years, and it seems to work. Okay, I use the back page as my guide. What does that mean? It means that if someone loses their job as a closer, and it is a big story on the back page of the New York Post, that's the guy you want, right? So that's a very small number of guys, and you got to get one of them. That's my theory. I got Liam Hendricks everywhere this year. Remember, I paid the extra $1 in labor, made extra $2 above value, because even though I got a little nervous there when Kimbrel came over, because Hendricks was going to be the closer. He was going to have every opportunity. That's why I was a little nervous about Edwin Diaz. Aroldis Chapman, same deal. Kenley Jansen, I invested in last offseason, because if Kenley Jansen lost that job, the clubhouse would be a story. And managers don't like stories. They don't like distractions. Ask Urban Meyer. Sorry, a little football joke, which I don't even follow. But that's the point to me. You got to get one of those guys. You got to get one of the elite closers in baseball. If you have the opportunity, you got to make sure you get one. And there aren't that many, so you pay up for it. That's definitely in NFBC. You just pay for it. You go get yourself Hendricks, Hader, Chapman, Iglesias, Jansen. And there's probably more that I'm not thinking of. Diaz, we can argue about Diaz. We argue about Diaz. But I say you've got to get one. And then you're only fighting for one. Because anything can happen. Anything can happen. With all the rest of these closers, not only are you wasting draft capital, but like you said, you're wasting your fab money in a way that is probably not going to work. It's very rare that it works.
Yeah.
So, that people stick. Anyway.
Just to throw in something else, there's a direct correlation. It's very, very well regressed that the more wins a team has, the more saves the team has. So in general, if you're going to pick a team, if the Dodgers were supposed to be a good team, pretty good to pick Kenley Jansen because he's on a good team. So there you go.
And that was the thought behind Liam Hendricks. I think he's the best closer on the best team. That's what I thought, and that's why I paid for him. And I trust his stuff more than I did Chapman, which is why I invested in Hendricks.
Right.
And that was the same thought why me and Aro invested a lot in Will Smith. We thought he was going to be the closer. We thought it was going to be a good team, so you get a guy who's going to get the most of the saves.
Good for you guys. I was not on Will Smith at all. I was so nervous about that situation. I just thought that there were too many. I wasn't convinced. And if I'm not convinced about a team's situation, I don't want it.
Now, you know what? The thing about Will Smith, though, is that Atlanta bullpen had a zillion lefties and one righty. So the closer was going to be a lefty. Righty.
But then what do you do with someone like Jake McGee, who came out of nowhere? He had horrible seasons. I mean, a couple of decent seasons in the past, but he was and that was with Tampa. But he came out of nowhere, and he's a lefty, and he was playing for a bad team. He was going to the season. They thought everyone thinks the Giants were going to be a bad team.
McGee was a dart. He was the dart.
That was literally a dart.
So
and
was
he turned out to be
Melancon.
one of the top closers.
So
So was
Melancon.
Melancon for sure.
So
And
was
I
Melancon,
stayed as far away from that San Diego Padre, the San Francisco Giants. I didn't want anything to do with that. I was drafting Kimbrel. I was drafting Hendricks. And Kimbrel is a dangerous player to draft because I should have had the foresight to say, well, what if the Cubs fall out of it and he gets moved? It did not occur to me that he would move to a team where he would not be the closer.
Yeah,
because
that was a low probability on that.
Yeah,
you know.
that was tough, and he stunk in Chicago. Thank goodness, actually, because I had a lot more Hendricks than I did the one team I had Kimbrel on.
Yeah. Another question here. What lesson learned? We talk about market premium in terms of paying more. How about market discount? What I found this year, it worked, that there was a market discount on corner infielders, meaning you can wait and you take a corner late. Like, let me give you a couple examples. How about Joey Votto, Yuli Gurriel, Austin Riley, Justin Turner, Jonathan India, Jared Walsh, Mountcastle, Escobar. I can name you 10 of these corner infielders taken very late in drafts, and they turned a huge profit. That's a market discount for corner infielders. You do not have to clog them up early. Do you agree with that market discount? Is that a lesson to be learned to next year? Obviously, you have to see what the player pool is, but I find that could go on again.
People who listen to Ariel Cohen's and Ruvain's show, what Ariel's talking about right here was one of the main keys to my success in AL Labor. I firmly believe that the reason I won the league was because of David Fletcher at second base and Jose Iglesias, believe it or not, at middle infield, because it's AL only. There was a glut at the back of the middle infield. So I paid up for Tim Anderson. I paid $30 for Tim Anderson, but then took the $8, I think it was $8 for David Fletcher, who was until the end of the season just phenomenal, and then $4 for Jose Iglesias, which seems like a lot, but it's not, right? But that's where the glut was. That was like the biggest, I think, one of the biggest values that I learned from learning the values is where that glut is, and then saving your money and using it in other spaces. Now, I would argue that Jose Ramirez, there are certain players that bust out of that, right? Because Ramirez being able to give you the stolen bases. I don't know. I'll send it back to you. Well, first go to Ruvain, but then Ruvain, you answer, and then I'm going to ask a question. Ruvain, go.
Sure. Okay. The corner infield, you could have had so many cheap guys later on, and if you would have waited, you could have paid the market premium for those middle infielders and still gotten the Austin Riley to play your corner infield and gotten a lot of value out of him. So I think the values can stay the same because I think the middle infield guys, the shortstops, all the ones that are going to be changing teams this offseason, those are the ones that are going to be hyped up. Those are the ones that are going to say, "Oh, I'm going to do well in this new surroundings. I'm going to bust out." What if Trevor Story goes to the Yankees? His values, people think his values are going to go through the roof, which means that the corner infield is the place to continue to get that market discount.
The market discount, yeah. Okay, so now, Ariel, with the understanding that corner infield has this glut, right? Does that discount Jose Ramirez for you? Or are there some players that are just so good and bring so much value to a position that you don't expect to get, right? To get those stolen bases from third base opens up so many other possibilities for you in the middle infield, right? So maybe you don't need him at second base. You can pay cheap for Jonathan Scope to get the extra power. Or do you say, no, stay away from Jose Ramirez because there's so many other options?
The top of the draft is a different animal than the bottom of the draft. The top couple rounds, I'm looking for the stats and the profile for the player. I'm not looking at the position. Other than I don't want to double up. I would not want to take Freddie Freeman and Jose Ramirez in the first two picks because then I'm locked in corner. I want to take an outfielder if possible, but I'm good with taking any position. Like the position doesn't bother me.
That was that's my instinct as well. Is that when you have a guy like that even so spend your money. I still always think about auctions. They're so much more fun than drafting. Personally, it's just you really get to control how the auction goes and what your team looks like. But for me, I was going to say the same thing, that if you have the opportunity to get Jose Ramirez, you put him in that lineup. It just gives you so much flexibility elsewhere.
Yeah. So I actually think, to answer my original question about corner infielders, I actually think there's going to be a large market premium for middle infielders because just as Ruvain said, they're changing teams. There's going to be hype. I kind of think that middle infielders are going to be more overvalued than they should this year, and I don't know if I want to pay that premium. I mean, this year you found a lot of guys high up, Bogarts, Tim Anderson. I thought there was a plethora of guys in the middle. I even think Bo Bichette was very undervalued for where he went. I think that you're not going to have that. I think that they're going to be actually a little bit out of reach, and so the outfield